This story opens with the quiet view of what appears to be an ordinary school bathed in the soft morning light. Among the rows of students walking through the gates, a boy with dark green hair gazes thoughtfully at the building before him. In his mind, he wonders aloud that if this world were a fairy tale, then who, out of all the people living in it, would be the true protagonist of that story? With a hint of irony in his tone, he concludes that unfortunately it would certainly not be him. This boy introduces himself as Nakayama Kaotaro, an average student with no special qualities, at least in his own eyes. Soon after, he crosses paths with a girl from his class, a delicate-looking student with snow-white hair and striking blue eyes that seem to reflect the sky. There's a faint spark in the air when their eyes meet, as if something quietly begins to change at that very moment. And so, without them realizing it, yet the story of these two begins from that encounter. A few days earlier, Nakayama had been sitting in his classroom, surrounded by the usual noise and chatter that filled every school afternoon. A group of lively girls were gathered around a tall, well-groomed boy named Ryuzaki. Their voices rose with excitement as they invited him to go shopping for swimsuits after school. Ryuzaki laughed it off, reminding them that it was only May and that summer was still far away. But this just made them more insistent. It was easy to see that Ryuzaki was the typical cool and handsome guy of the class, the one every girl admired and wanted to be around. Watching the scene from his seat, Nakayama quietly observed and mused that if life really were a fairy tale, then Ryuzaki would undoubtedly be the protagonist. The girls, however, continued their playful conversation, each trying to catch Ryuzaki's attention. One of them, wearing her hair in twin ponytails, cheerfully declared that she wanted him to see her in a swimsuit as soon as possible. Another second girl blushed slightly as she admitted that she had outgrown her old swimsuit since last year, clearly hinting that she wanted him to notice her figure. The third girl giggled and said she would buy whichever swimsuit he liked best if he just went along with them. Their excitement filled the room, and it became painfully obvious that Ryuzaki was the center of everyone's admiration. Meanwhile, Nakayama could only sigh quietly to himself, half amused and half resigned, realizing once again that in the grand story of their school life, he was definitely not the hero. After watching that scene unfold, Nakayama lets out a quiet sigh. He mutters to himself that Ryuzaki's daily life could easily be mistaken for a romantic comedy, while his own life feels painfully ordinary, more like that of a side character who merely exists in the background. He reflects that before starting high school, he never imagined things would turn out this way. Everything began to change the moment those three girls met Ryuzaki. Since the day they entered high school together, the distance between them and Nakayama had slowly grown, as if an invisible line had been drawn to separate their worlds, and he begins to recall each of them one by one. First, there was Asura, the type of girl who naturally gave off the energy of a younger sister, like cheerful, clingy, and a bit naive. She had grown to admire Ryuzaki deeply, almost to the point of idolization. Even though Nakayama and she were never particularly close, he always thought of her as someone he should look after, treating her like a caring older brother would. Then came Yuzuki, his childhood friend. There was a time when she and Nakayama shared everything from small secrets to silly arguments. But after her so-called love at first sight moment with Ryuzaki, she began to avoid Nakayama altogether. He remembers how she used to be insecure about her body, yet now she flaunts her newfound confidence like a weapon, using it to charm the very boy who had stolen her heart. It feels strange to Nakayama though, almost as if she has become someone he no longer recognizes. Finally, there was Kurari, once his closest friend, a shy, bookish girl who spent more time lost in novels than talking to people. In middle school, she used to say that love was trivial compared to the worlds she found in her books. But somewhere along the way, she changed. She stopped reading, changed her appearance, and began acting differently, all in an attempt to be noticed by Ryuzaki. Watching her twist her personality for someone else made Nakayama feel uneasy. He never wanted to see someone destroy their own individuality just to be liked. Still, Nakayama admits that his feelings aren't entirely selfless. It is not as if he harbors hidden desires or hopes of dating any of them. But somewhere deep inside, he can't help but wish that he could have been the one sitting in Ryuzaki's place, the one those three girls admired and cared about. The thought makes him feel slightly ashamed, aware of how arrogant it sounds, yet he can't completely deny it. He recalls moments from the past, small, seemingly insignificant choices he made when talking to those girls. If he had acted differently at any of those crossroads, maybe things would have turned out another way. Maybe he could have been in Ryuzaki's position. But such thoughts are nothing more than idle fantasies. In the end, Nakayama laughs at himself, realizing how foolish he sounds. To him, his role is clear and unchangeable. He is merely a mob character in the romantic comedy that revolves around the cool guy Ryuzaki. He is someone without meaning, without purpose, and destined to fade quietly into the background. While he is thinking all this, he looks that Ryuzaki makes a move. He asks another girl with white hair who is sleeping in her desk if she wanna come with. Nakayama says in his mind that Ryuzaki is truly living a flashy school rom-com with multiple heroines, a perfect school harem romantic comedy, and this harem was not limited to the trio mentioned before. Seated beside Ryuzaki was a girl who appeared drowsy, sleeping in the desk. Her calm and quiet presence contrasted sharply with the lively chatter around her, so Ryuzaki turned toward her and mentioned that they were planning to go swimsuit shopping after school, casually inviting her to come along as well. Her name was Shiho Shimatsuki. At first glance, she seemed distant, perhaps even unfriendly or perpetually in a bad mood, but in truth, this was simply how she had always been. Nobody in their class could recall ever seeing her laugh or even smile. Her words were few, her facial expressions almost motionless, and her voice carried a soft, flat tone that rarely shifted, as if emotion itself barely reached her. And yet, despite her apparent coldness, Shiho was not disliked by anyone. There was something ethereal about her, an unspoken grace that drew people in rather than pushing them away. She possessed the air of a princess who had quietly stepped out of a storybook. She is a character both distant and mesmerizing and oblivious by the noise of the world around her. To the eyes of those watching, she was someone who existed on a different level, beautiful, mysterious, and untouchable. It was no wonder that Ryuzaki seemed to harbor special feelings for her among all the girls who surrounded him. Compared to the others, Shiho felt like she belonged to another realm entirely, as though she were the main heroine of a tale that only she could complete and the one destined to receive the protagonist's affection. While Nakayama was lost in his thoughts, his gaze briefly wandered toward Shiho Shimatsuki. To his surprise, her eyes seemed to meet his for a fleeting moment. For an instant, it felt as though their eyes were staring directly at him with her calm yet unreadable expression. But he quickly convinced himself it was just his imagination, because someone like her wouldn't be looking at someone like him after all. When the final bell rang, the students began leaving one by one. Nakayama gathered his things and walked home under the soft afternoon light. He lays on his bed, his mind still replaying the scenes of the day. He pictured the girls excitedly shopping for swimsuits with Ryuzaki, probably laughing and trying on clothes together. Then, without realizing it, his thoughts drifted toward Shimatsuki again. He wondered what her voice sounded like when she spoke at length, or how she might look if she ever smiled. It struck him that he had never really seen her express much of anything. After too long pondering over such thoughts, Nakayama shook his head and sighed. There was no point in thinking about things that didn't concern him. Forcing himself to focus, he decided to get some homework done. But when he reached for his textbook, he noticed his school bag felt lighter than usual, and realized he had forgotten his book back in the classroom. Grumbling quietly to himself, he grabbed his jacket and set off toward the school again. By the time he arrived, nearly an hour had passed since classes had ended. The building was quiet, the air inside cool and still carrying only the faint echoes of earlier activity. As he stepped into his classroom, he froze because there, resting her head on her folded arms, was Shiho Shimatsuki fast asleep at her desk. Her silver hair shimmered softly under the dim light filtering through the window, giving her an almost fragile appearance. For a moment, Nakayama simply stood there, unsure of what to do. He hesitated, then softly called her name, but she didn't stir. His mind raced to find something to say, but instead he found himself wondering why she was there alone. He asked himself why she wasn't with Ryuzaki and the others, and what had kept her behind when everyone else had gone. He looks closely at her and realizes she is sleeping. Her face is really angelical, and he cannot hold but keep watching her. But then he scolds himself for looking too much. Quickly, he thinks that it is getting pretty late, and that she might be in danger walking home alone since she might come across a random pervert. Nakayama thinks the best bet is to wake her up, even though he might scare her for doing it. When he is about to do this, a strong breeze goes inside the classroom, making the curtain cover her head. He removes the curtain but accidentally touches her gentle hair, waking her up in the act. Just as Nakayama stood there unsure of what to do next, a quiet voice called out his name. Startled, he turned toward the sound and realizes Shimotsuki was now awake, her clear blue eyes fixed directly on him. The sudden eye contact made his pulse quicken, so he stammered, trying to explain himself, blurting out that he hadn't been trying to prank her or watch her while she slept. His words came out rushed and awkward, tangled by embarrassment. Before she could say anything else, his nerves got the better of him, and he turned on his heels, hastily apologizing as he ran toward the door. But before he could get far, she had stood up and started to follow him. Just as she was about to reach him, she tripped and fell forward. Nakayama instinctively stopped and rushed to her side, asking if she was okay. Then, in a sudden and almost theatrical motion, Shiho reached out and grasped both of his hands tightly. Her eyes glimmered faintly under the dim classroom light as she whispered, in a calm but oddly triumphant tone, that she had caught him. For a moment, Nakayama froze, unsure how to react. She began to softly trace her fingers over his hands, almost as if she were testing something, like a scientist conducting an experiment. Her face showed a rare hint of curiosity, and her usual blankness replaced by a quiet intensity. Blushing, Nakayama awkwardly asked what exactly she was trying to do. Shimotsuki lifted her gaze toward him and replied in her usual calm voice that she was testing a theory. She explained that she had always suffered from a strange habit. Basically, whenever she was around people, she would just freeze up completely. It is like her body would stiffen, her words would fail, and she could never smile or hold a proper conversation, just looking there emotionless. But now, holding his hands, she realized something different. Now she could speak naturally, without tension, without fear. Her voice carried no trace of hesitation as she told him that, for some reason, he didn't make her nervous at all. It was as though the weight she usually felt around others had disappeared. Nakayama could hardly process what he was hearing. A part of him wanted to believe it meant something, but another part reminded him that he was just a background character in Ryuzaki's romantic story. And yet, before he could retreat back into his thoughts, Shiho looked up at him once more. She quietly said that there was something she wanted to ask of him, a small favor. With a voice super delicate but full of good expectative, she asked him if they could be friends. That moment lingered in Nakayama's mind. Standing there under the fading classroom light, he realized that something inside him had begun to shift. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't a side character in this story after all. The next morning, Nakayama woke up feeling unusually refreshed. As he sat up in bed, the memories of the previous evening rushed back to him. That quiet classroom, the soft touch of Shiho Shimotsuki's hands, and above all, her unexpected request to become friends. Then, realizing he was starting to drift off into daydreams again, he slapped his cheeks lightly to snap himself out of it, and he muttered to himself that today somehow felt like it was going to be a good day. When he arrived at school, near the entrance of the classroom stood one of his classmates, a cheerful guy wearing a hat hanagishi. As soon as he spotted Nakayama, he greeted him with a friendly wave. The two exchanged casual morning words before their attention was drawn toward the same familiar scene, a small crowd of girls gathering around Ryuzaki, chattering and laughing as if he were some kind of idol. Hanagishi gave a half-amused, half-exasperated sigh. He muttered that Ryuzaki was already surrounded again first thing in the morning, and joked that even if the guy was handsome, that didn't mean he had to be as popular as a celebrity. There was a trace of jealousy in his tone, the kind that comes from envy rather than resentment. Nakayama couldn't help but agree. Watching Ryuzaki effortlessly charm people without even trying always made him wonder. He was undeniably good-looking and confident, but still he wonders, how did someone like him manage to gather a small harem out of nowhere? Popularity like that wasn't something that could be explained by looks alone. The thought lingered in Nakayama's mind, stirring a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the classroom door slid open. Shiho Shimotsuki stepped inside, her usual calm demeanor intact. though her expression seemed more serious than yesterday. Her presence immediately drew a silent wave of attention. Even without saying a word, she exuded an air of quiet authority, the kind that made ordinary students instinctively lower their voices. Nakayama felt his chest tighten slightly. For normal guys like him or Hanajishi, Shimitsuki was someone to be admired and feared from a distance. The fact that he had somehow become friends with such a girl felt almost surreal. Hanajishi leaned closer and whispered that just looking at her made him nervous, his tone half joking but half sincere. Nakayama didn't answer right away. He realized that strangely enough, he didn't feel the same kind of nervous excitement others did when looking at her. Maybe it was because she had spoken to him so openly the day before, or perhaps because of that moment they shared in the empty classroom. Still, he couldn't ignore how different their worlds were. He knew that if he suddenly started talking to her in front of everyone, it would draw unwanted attention. People would wonder what kind of relationship they had, and rumors would spread before he could even explain himself. For someone like him, a self-proclaimed background character, being noticed like that was the last thing he wanted. So as he quietly took his seat, Nakayama told himself to be careful. No matter what had happened yesterday, it didn't change the fact that someone like Shiho Shimitsuki lived in a world far beyond his reach. When the lunch break finally arrived, Nakayama saw Shiho Shimitsuki was walking straight toward him. Her expression looked slightly irritated, as if something had been bothering her. Nakayama blinked, unsure what to say as she stopped in front of his desk. Before he could even ask what was wrong, she told him in a tone that was both flustered and serious that since they had agreed to be friends, he should at least talk to her. She said that friends who ignore each other couldn't possibly be called friends at all, and that his silence had been terrible. Caught off guard, Nakayama quickly tried to explain himself. He told her that he hadn't meant to ignore her. He simply thought she might not feel comfortable speaking in public, since she often seemed shy and withdrawn, so he had wanted to avoid putting her in an awkward position. Shiho listened quietly, her serious gaze softening as she realized his intention. After a brief pause, she nodded in understanding, but replied that, even so, it would trouble her more if he didn't talk to her at all. She added with a faint smile that she would prefer if he could take the initiative next time and speak to her first. The tension between them faded, instantly replaced by a quiet warmth. Nakayama felt relief wash over him. He apologized for the misunderstanding and assured her that he had never meant to upset her. He told her that he would never hate her for something so small, and that he hoped they could get along better from now on. Shiho's cheeks flushed a bit again, but this time the look on her face was one of genuine happiness. Now that the air had cleared between them, she hesitated for a moment before asking, in a soft voice, if she could call him by his first name from now on. She wanted them to talk more naturally, even if it might sound a little rude at first, so she explained that this would help them grow closer as friends. Then almost shyly she reached out and tugged gently at the sleeve of his school jacket, her blue eyes glancing upward to meet his. She told him that in return, he should call her by her given name as well, because that would make them look and feel like real friends. Without hesitation, Nakayama agreed. He spoke her name softly, and for a moment Shiho froze. Her expression went blank, as if her mind had stopped processing what just happened. Then, realizing how flustered she felt, she quickly ducked her head and her face turning red. She apologized awkwardly, murmuring that once she calmed down, she would try to call him by his first name too. The moment hung between them for a few seconds, simple, quiet, but strangely endearing. Eventually, their stomachs began to grumble at almost the same time. Breaking the silence, both laughed lightly, and Shiho suggested that they go eat together. They sat by the window, side by side, as the soft daylight spilled across their desks. Nakayama unwrapped his small meal, a single piece of melon bread. Shiho blinked in surprise and asked if that was really all he was planning to eat. When he nodded, she frowned slightly and told him that melon bread was just a dessert, not a proper meal, and that it wasn't healthy to eat so little. She spoke with concern, saying that a balanced diet was important. Before he could protest, she opened her own neatly prepared lunchbox and smiled faintly. She told him that her mother had made extra food that morning, so there was more than enough for both of them. Without waiting for him to argue, she carefully placed a portion of her lunch in front of him and said that from now on they should share. For Nakayama, this moment felt strangely peaceful. During lunch, Shimotsuki suddenly decides to feed him directly, holding a piece of food in front of his mouth as if he were a child. Nakayama grows nervous and tries to refuse, saying that he can eat on his own, but she insists that it is rude to be so distant with a friend. With a firm yet flustered tone, she orders him to open his mouth. He hesitates, thinking that no matter how close two friends are, this is going too far. Yet despite his embarrassment, he finally takes a bite. The taste surprises him since it's genuinely delicious. When he admits it aloud, she turns red and looks away, murmuring that he shouldn't say things that make her so self-conscious. Then, with a faint smile, she confesses that she has always wanted to do things like this, ordinary things that friends usually do together, and that being able to share this moment makes her genuinely happy. Looking into her eyes, Nakayama feels a quiet warmth spreading through his chest. She then asks him if he would be willing to help her experience many more friend things from now on. He studies her expression for a moment, noticing how her small movements make her resemble an adorable squirrel. But for a moment he forgets his place as a background mob character, feeling that even someone like him has the right to feel this simple happiness besides her. Ever since Nakayama entered high school, every day had felt dull and repetitive, as if his life were painted in shades of gray. But ever since Shimotsuki appeared, everything seemed to change. Now each day felt unexpectedly lively, as though color had quietly returned to his world. She looked at him with a mischievous yet endearing smile, and her eyes glimmering with playful intent. With a teasing tone, she asked if his heart had started pounding when she fed him earlier. Caught off guard, Nakayama immediately denied it, trying to sound calm, though his stiff posture betrayed him. Shimotsuki, still smiling, softly confessed that her ears were very sharp enough to hear the sound of his heartbeat. That moment brought back the stories she had told him the day before. In the flashback, she had revealed her strange gift. Since birth, she had been able to hear sounds that ordinary people could not. To her, every person carried a unique resonance. Gentle people emitted clear, pleasant tones, while those with cruel hearts produced harsh, grating noises, like nails scratching across a chalkboard. Her hearing was so keen that she could sense a person's nature and emotions simply through the sounds they produced. Then this means it is something like a synesthesia, where people can hear colors, a mysterious perceptual phenomenon of hearing colors like do for red and re for green. In Shimotsuki's case, she is probably able to perceive other people's feelings from their sounds. He thinks this is pretty convenient, but she confesses that it really is not. Hearing other people's feelings is not always a good thing, because all people will not have good sounds. Basically, she could also hear the sound of lust and jealousy. It definitely should be hard to hear for a special girl like Shimotsuki. Shimotsuki believed that their encounter had been a work of fate. She explained that even in her sleep, her senses remained sharp, almost like those of an assassin, so it amazed her that she hadn't awakened until Nakayama had touched her. He tried to downplay it, saying that calling it fate was far too dramatic, but she simply smiled and replied that his sound never made her nervous. To her, Nakayama's sound resembled the gentle chirping of birds and the calm flow of a river, and she admitted that she truly liked it. Her words made him blush, unsure of how to respond to such a poetic compliment. After that, she tilted her head and asked whether he was nervous at that very moment. She could tell by the way he fumbled with his steps and avoided her gaze while they walked together. To her, his awkwardness was oddly endearing, and she couldn't help but laugh softly. Nakayama, trying to recover from his embarrassment, muttered that Ryuzaki spent much more time with her than he did. The moment he said it, the mood shifted. Shimotsuki's expression darkened, her smile fading as a faint trace of irritation crossed her face. She quietly murmured that the sound had suddenly become unpleasant. It wasn't truly because of Nakayama's words, but because something else had caught her attention. She tensed up and told him they needed to move elsewhere quickly. Nakayama followed as she led him to a quieter corner of the schoolyard, her steps growing faster and her tone more urgent. She confessed in a whisper that they had to hide and keep away from him. Before Nakayama could ask what she meant, distant voices reached their ears, one belonging to a girl and the other unmistakably Ryuzaki. The two crouched behind a wall holding their breath, but their attempt to stay unseen didn't last long. Ryuzaki suddenly appeared, catching sight of them almost instantly. His confident expression turned puzzled as he called out to Shimizuki, asking what she was doing there. Then his gaze shifted toward Nakayama, and for a brief moment, tension filled the air. Their eyes met in silence before Ryuzaki finally broke it, demanding to know who Nakayama was and why he was with Shimizuki. Ryuzaki's expression hardened as he demanded an explanation. He wanted to know why Nakayama had brought Shimizuki to such an isolated spot, and the air instantly grew heavy with tension. Nakayama froze, struggling to find the right words, while his mind raced with confusion, asking why Ryuzaki was even here, and with Asusa of all people. Before he could answer, Ryuzaki turned away from him and hurried to Shimizuki's side, asking if she was all right. His concern was so immediate and focused that he didn't even glance back at Asusa, who stood a few steps behind. Her expression faltered, the faint glimmer in her eyes dimming as she lowered her gaze, quietly hurt by how easily he had shifted his attention to another girl. Nakayama noticed the subtle change in her face and that silent disappointment she tried to hide. When their eyes met for a brief moment, Asusa quickly turned away, pretending not to care. In that instant, Nakayama remembered what she had said earlier, that Ryuzaki was the one she had been looking for. It all began to make sense now. Nakayama deduced she hadn't simply wanted to talk to him, but she had probably come here to confess her feelings for him, and that she probably was going to confess to him this day. But Ryuzaki's eyes were fixed only on Shimizuki. He didn't even seem to notice that Asusa had gathered every ounce of courage just to be there with him. Watching this, Nakayama clenched his fists slightly as frustration. He had always wanted to be like an older brother figure for Asusa, someone she could rely on, but in the end, he could not become her Onii-chan. Even so, he still thought of her as his precious stepsister. And despite the pang in his chest, he didn't want to interfere with her feelings or her choices in love. While these thoughts ran through his mind, Ryuzaki's voice cut through the silence, demanding that he stop standing there and explain himself. His tone was sharp, filled with suspicion. Nakayama calmly replied that he hadn't done anything to Shimizuki and gently suggested that she should leave the scene to avoid further misunderstanding. But when he turned to her, he noticed her face had gone pale, her posture tense and timid. Concern immediately took over his thoughts, and he asked if she was feeling all right. Shimizuki shook her head slightly, her voice trembling as she admitted she wasn't okay. She said that Ryuzaki's presence was making her uncomfortable, that his sound was unpleasant, almost unbearable to her ears. Ryuzaki, confused and worried, stepped closer to her to check her condition, but this only made her recoil in fear. Seeing her reaction, Nakayama quickly stepped in and suggested that he should be the one to take her to the infirmary. Ryuzaki's eyes narrowed, and his tone grew more aggressive. He accused Nakayama of pretending to be some kind of hero and even blamed him for making her sick in the first place. Nakayama, keeping his composure, insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong. Shimizuki, still trembling, softly told him that it was fine, that she could go alone. But before she could move, Ryuzaki ordered Asusa to take her to the infirmary instead. Asusa froze for a moment, visibly conflicted. She didn't like how the situation was unfolding, nor how Ryuzaki's words sounded like commands rather than concern. Nakayama tried to intervene, telling Ryuzaki to wait. He reminded him that Asusa had come here for a reason, that she had something important to talk about, and suggested that he would take Shimizuki so the two could have their conversation in peace. But Ryuzaki refused flatly, saying that he wanted to talk to Nakayama instead. His tone carried a mix of irritation and pride, as if this was now a matter of principle. Against his will, Asusa obeyed and began to guide Shimizuki away. Though she looked hesitant and uneasy about leaving the two boys behind, Nakayama watched her go, his chest tightening with concern. He knew Asusa had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and yet everything had spiraled out of control. Still, he reminded himself that protecting Shimizuki's well-being was the most important thing right now. Turning back to Ryuzaki, he met his gaze directly. He stated firmly that he didn't know what Ryuzaki wanted to hear from him, but he repeated once again that he hadn't done anything to her. His patience was running thin as he finally asked why Ryuzaki was interfering so much, especially when he wasn't even her boyfriend. Ryuzaki's expression hardened. He answered that even if they weren't dating, as her childhood friend, It was his duty to protect her. He claimed that Shimotsuki was a fragile girl who no one truly understood, and that he was the only one capable of doing so, the only person who could exist in her world. He confessed that Shimotsuki is a weak girl that needs help, and he is the one that can help her. But upon hearing this, Nakayama feels uneasy since he highly disagrees with this absurd statement. So he tells him that he is way off the mark. He thinks Shimotsuki is not weak to the point she cannot live without help. It is easy to misunderstand her because of her attitude. She is just shy and nervous. But when she starts talking, she cannot stop smiling. She is just an ordinary girl like the others. As he stares at Ryuzaki, he begins to think that a protagonist cannot really think of such grandiose things. He has a twisted perception that believes that the world works for his convenience. He is so self-absorbed and always thinking in a self-righteous manner. He is the very definition of a bad harem protagonist. If suspicion rises and Shimotsuki follows Nakayama, then he cannot let this happen. At this point, Nakayama starts to think like it is video game, and he needs to take decisions for the general sake. And that is how to satisfy Ryuzaki's mind first. Nakayama found himself silently debating what to do next. The tension between him and Ryuzaki was still thick in the air, and he knew that one wrong word could make things worse. After a moment of reflection, he came to a simple conclusion, and that is that if he wanted to remove Ryuzaki's hostility, he would have to erase his own existence from Ryuzaki's mind. The problem was easy to understand. Ryuzaki's irritation stemmed from one thing: the sudden approach of a mysterious boy, Nakayama, toward Shimotsuki Shiho. To him, it felt like someone was trespassing into a space that had always belonged to him alone. As the self-proclaimed childhood friend, Ryuzaki's seat in the story was already fixed, and any outsider near the heroine would be treated as a threat. So the solution was clear. If he wanted to calm everything down, Nakayama simply had to vanish himself from Ryuzaki's perception, not literally, but as a rival. After all, he thought bitterly, that was what a mob character like him was supposed to do. He wasn't the hero of this tale, nor the one destined to win the girl's heart. His role was to briefly stir things up, cause a little conflict, and then gracefully step aside once the true protagonist overcame him. That was how stories like these were written, and he decided to follow the script perfectly. After thinking it through, Nakayama took his move. With a calm tone, he told Ryuzaki that nothing serious had happened, and that he had only thought Shimotsuki was cute and had tried to confess to her. But her defenses were far too strong for him to even get close. Ryuzaki blinked with his suspicion faltering. Then he asked if Nakayama actually liked her. Playing his role flawlessly, Nakayama shrugged and said that she was indeed cute, but judging from how she reacted, there was no chance for him to succeed anyway. The moment he said this, he noticed Ryuzaki's shoulders relax, his expression softened, and a faint grin replaced his glare. It worked. Nakayama's fabricated confession story, and it had effectively removed him from the list of threats. Ryuzaki chuckled and said that Nakayama was just another challenger, someone bound to lose in the end. Deep down, Nakayama understood what that really meant. Ryuzaki had been afraid that Shimotsuki might be taken away by someone else. But now, that fear had vanished. Nakayama played along, adding that he had only wanted to be friends with her, though he supposed he had aimed too high and failed miserably. With that, Ryuzaki finally seemed satisfied. His usual confident smile returned as he nodded in understanding, completely buying into the story Nakayama had woven. Inside, Nakayama reminded himself that a true mob character didn't need emotions. He had done what needed to be done for the sake of the story, even if that meant lying and downplaying his own feelings. Then, to his surprise, Ryuzaki let out a small laugh. He said that he didn't dislike delusional idiots like Nakayama, that, in fact, this kind of thing was what youth was all about. With a friendlier tone, he reached out his hand and said they should become friends. The words hit Nakayama, and for a brief second, he recalled the moment Shimotsuki had asked him the very same thing, to be friends. The irony made him sigh inwardly, yet he couldn't help but smile, faintly annoyed that Ryuzaki didn't even remember the name of a classmate he'd spent months with, but Nakayama still accepted the gesture. He gave his name as Nakayama Kautaro, and the two shook hands, one doing it out of politeness. Then Ryuzaki, after memorized his name, decides to leave and say goodbye. Nakayama sighs as he fawned upon him. He thinks that Ryuzaki ridiculed him and it just so miserable. But it is all fine since it cannot be helped and is the way to protect Shimotsuki too. He ends up saying that mob characters do not need emotions. He punches the floor a bit frustrated, thinking that the smile on his face is probably too distorted and unbearable to look at. But even so, this is the mob habit, which is ingrained in Nakayama, and it won't come out, even if it hurts him. The following day, Ryuzaki began to interact more openly with Nakayama, an obvious consequence of their confrontation the day before. During lunch, he casually asked why Nakayama hadn't invited Shimotsuki to join them. Nakayama replied that he simply didn't want to bother her. In reality, Shimotsuki had tried several times to approach him, but to avoid drawing unwanted attention, Nakayama had started keeping his distance. His caution managed to keep Ryuzaki's suspicions in check, but at the same time, it came at a price. It hurt Shimotsuki's feelings. That afternoon, Ryuzaki said goodbye to Nakayama before heading home. The day finally came to an end, and Nakayama could only hope that Ryuzaki's vigilance would ease by tomorrow, especially since, in theory, he posed no real threat. Deep down, Nakayama had always struggled with the feeling of being invisible. It was as if he were destined to play a background role in everyone else's lives. He didn't even feel like the protagonist of his own story. For as long as he could remember, he had seen himself as nothing more than a side character, a prop meant to fill the space around others. That sense of insignificance only grew worse after entering high school, when he began to drift apart from the girls he had once been close to. Nakayama often wondered why his life felt so monotonous, and eventually, he reached a simple conclusion. He was merely a supporting character in Ryuzaki's story. In silence, he accepted that role. The quiet figure meant to help the real protagonist shine. In his mind, the story revolved around three girls vying for Ryuzaki's attention, though Ryuzaki himself only seemed to care for his quiet childhood friend, Shimotsuki. Nakayama even came up with a name for this imagined tale, one that he considered ridiculous yet oddly fitting. The three girls, Azusa, Yuzuki, and Karate, had all met Ryuzaki during the entrance exams, and their personalities had changed dramatically ever since. However, if Ryuzaki were truly the story's main character, none of the three stood a real chance at winning his heart. The central heroine was clearly Shimotsuki. For that reason, Nakayama had made it his mission to protect her, even if that meant slowing the story's natural progression to prevent her from ending up with Ryuzaki too soon. Although Shimotsuki still wanted to talk to him, Nakayama continued to act cautiously, avoiding anything that might raise suspicion. Lost in thought, he suddenly heard a familiar voice behind him. Turning around, he saw Shimotsuki in a small predicament. She explained, slightly embarrassed, that it was her first time taking the bus. She had remembered she needed money, but in her rush to catch up with him, she had left her wallet at school. Nakayama helped her without hesitation. Grateful, Shimotsuki called him a hero, though Nakayama immediately dismissed the compliment, insisting that he was nothing more than a side character. Shimotsuki disagreed. To her, he was simply being too modest. She told him he was a good person, even if he refused to believe it, and that he should learn to give himself a little credit now and then. If he wouldn't, then she would do it for him. Smiling, she promised to find things to praise about him, asking only one thing in return, that he stop referring to himself as a supporting character. With a teasing tone, she added that it seemed as though all protagonists suffered from chronic low self-esteem. She genuinely believed that Nakayama was a kind, dependable person and wanted him to start believing in himself too, though he still felt trapped in the mindset of a background character. Shimotsuki's encouragement left a small but undeniable mark on his heart. Later that day, Shimotsuki visited Nakayama's house. As soon as she arrived, she stepped into the living room and made herself comfortable, while Nakayama went to prepare some snacks. Curious, she asked when his parents would return, saying she wanted to introduce herself as his good friend. Nakayama doubted she would actually manage to do it. Her shy nature made that unlikely, but she insisted that she could. When he told her that his parents were away on a business trip, she looked a bit disappointed. She felt sorry that Nakayama spent so much time alone, so she offered, half-jokingly, to pamper him whenever he needed company. Although Shimotsuki tried to act like an older sister, Nakayama could easily see that she behaved much more like a younger one. Still, he appreciated her concern and accepted her offer with a quiet smile. Despite her efforts to seem mature, her energy and innocence reminded him of Azusa, and strangely enough, that familiarity made him feel at ease. After finishing the snacks, Shimizuki moved on to what she considered the most important part of her visit. With her usual confidence, she asked Nakayama where his room was and, without waiting for an answer, went straight up to the second floor. Once there, she was surprised to discover that the room was surrounded by shelves overflowing with books. Curious, Shimizuki asked if he enjoyed reading, and Nakayama confirmed that he did. She then admitted that she rarely read, since she preferred spending her free time watching anime or playing video games. However, she quickly realized that there were no games in sight. Embarrassed, Nakayama apologized for having such a boring room, though Shimizuki couldn't understand why he felt the need to say that. To her, it didn't seem boring at all. On the contrary, she found the atmosphere interesting, much like its owner. Deep down, she simply wanted to know him better and understand what kind of person he really was. To break the ice, Shimizuki suggested that, if his room truly felt dull, they could always make it more lively. She offered to bring some games and fun items next time, an idea that Nakayama accepted, albeit with hesitation. Even so, he reminded her that midterm exams were just 2 weeks away, and perhaps it wasn't the best time to think about playing. Upon hearing this, Shimizuki looked away, clearly avoiding the subject. For her, a student's true duty was to enjoy life, not to drown in studies. Half joking, she remarked that maybe she would study more if Nakayama himself were the one teaching her. The suggestion unsettled him. He felt that teaching the main heroine of the story was far from his role. However, after shaking off his doubts, Nakayama sighed, closed the curtains, and decided to go along with her plan, though not without some reluctance. He preferred to avoid studying together at school, fearing that Ryuzaki might notice and misunderstand the situation. Just as he was about to speak again, Shimizuki's sharp hearing caught the sound of approaching footsteps. Confused, she asked who it could be, since Nakayama had mentioned that he lived alone. A few seconds later, she clearly heard a girl coming closer to the door. Immediately, she accused him of being unfaithful. Nakayama, bewildered, didn't know what to say. Shimizuki frowned and repeated the accusation. Then, it dawned on him. She must have assumed he lived by himself. He realized that he had never mentioned Azusa, his younger sister, trying to clear things up. Nakayama calmly explained the situation and went out to find Azusa. When he asked her to meet his friend, she seemed slightly annoyed but followed him anyway. However, the moment she entered the room and saw Shimizuki, both froze in shock. The tension was immediate. Despite the explanation, Shimizuki remained convinced that Azusa was Nakayama's girlfriend. No matter how many times he denied it, she didn't seem to believe him. Azusa, equally confused, finally intervened and stated bluntly that they were only family, nothing more. She even added, half-jokingly, that this isn't that kind of manga. Only then did Shimizuki begin to process what was happening. After observing them closely, she noticed they didn't act like a couple at all. Feeling deeply embarrassed, she hid under Nakayama's blanket, grabbed a pillow, and ran out of the house, refusing his offer to walk her home. Unfortunately, off-screen, she ended up tripping down the stairs. A while later, Nakayama returned to his room, lamenting the loss of the pillow. Azusa asked whether Shimizuki was alright, and he replied that her mother would come to pick her up soon. Taking advantage of the moment, Azusa asked about his relationship with Shimizuki, since she hadn't realized they were already that close. The question brought an awkward silence, something that had become common between them in recent months. Then, unexpectedly, Azusa asked if Ryuzaki knew about this situation. That question made Nakayama tense up immediately. He realized he had been too careless. He was aware of the complex love dynamics between Azusa, Ryuzaki, and Shimizuki. And now, with Azusa knowing more than she should, the balance could easily crumble. Still, Nakayama knew that Ryuzaki would not simply give up. If anything, he would try even harder to win Shimizuki's heart. Desperate, Nakayama begged Azusa to keep his closeness with Shimizuki a secret. He absolutely didn't want Ryuzaki to find out. Azusa, trying to calm him, promised not to say anything. To her, it wasn't a big deal. but if it mattered that much to him, she was willing to cooperate. After all, for Azusa, nothing had changed. Her main goal remained the same: to make Ryuzaki fall in love with her. Nakayama could hear the sincerity in Azusa's voice. Unlike him, she always faced her problems directly. Feeling guilty for having misunderstood her, he offered an apology, though Azusa failed to understand why he was saying sorry. Afterward, she quietly returned to her room, but not before encouraging him to do his best. Even though Nakayama thought of himself as a failure in his role as an older brother, he still wished for her happiness above all else. When Azusa closed the door behind her, she found herself surprised. Despite the harsh things she had said to Nakayama in the past, he had never once shown anger toward her. Instead, he continued to act like a kind and patient brother. Memories from long ago began to surface in her mind. Before her father remarried, Azusa had once had a biological older brother. He had been her entire world, the person she trusted most, who was always there to protect her. However, one day, that brother passed away. For a long time, the young Azusa waited for his return, unable to comprehend why he never came home. As the days turned into weeks, she began to believe she was the reason for his absence. She even asked her father if her brother would come back if she behaved well, but her father had no answer to give. From that day on, it was as if time had stopped for her. Her body barely grew, as though her heart refused to move forward. When her father eventually remarried, Azusa hoped that the change would mark a new beginning. Unfortunately, those hopes quickly faded. She gained a new older brother, Nakayama, yet he did not fit the image of the brother she had once idolized. Over time, that feeling of strangeness deepened until she began to believe that Nakayama simply wasn't her fated brother. Not long after, a young man named Ryuzaki appeared, someone who bore a striking resemblance to her late sibling. From the moment she met him, Azusa was drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. Although she didn't dislike Nakayama, Ryuzaki's presence overshadowed him completely. Her heart gravitated toward Ryuzaki until he became the center of her attention. At one point, Azusa wondered what might happen if she told Ryuzaki about Nakayama and Shimizuki, even though she had no intention of actually doing it. For a brief moment, she imagined Nakayama treating her gently again, spoiling her like before. The thought was almost tempting. Yet, in her mind, she could still hear Nakayama's calm voice telling her to do her best. Those simple words were enough to sweep away any darker thoughts. Azusa then walked quietly back to her room, her bunny slippers brushing against the floor. After closing the door behind her, she took a deep breath. She had made a promise not to say anything, and she intended to keep it. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, Shimizuki sat completely absorbed in her phone. Watching her, Nakayama suddenly came up with an unexpected idea: to begin studying. Shimizuki, without looking up, explained that she was already doing something educational, a game about raising a digital horse. Nakayama, however, was referring to real studying, with notebooks and textbooks. Shimizuki groaned in frustration. She had always hated studying and saw little point in it. In her view, if something felt meaningless, it should at least be fun. Trying to encourage her, Nakayama offered a slice of cake as motivation. Shimizuki's eyes lit up immediately, and she nearly reached for it before realizing it was a trap. With suspicion written on her face, she pulled her hand back. Despite her playful resistance, Shimizuki secretly feared that her laziness might make Nakayama dislike her. He quickly reassured her that such a thing could never happen. When he asked if there was anything in her lessons she didn't understand, she replied without hesitation that she didn't understand anything. Together, they decided to start from the very beginning. As the afternoon went on, Shimizuki mentioned that the two of them rarely spoke at school. Nakayama apologized, explaining that he didn't want to attract Ryuzaki's attention. Shimizuki understood the reason and accepted it with a soft smile. Deep down, she appreciated the effort he made to protect her. What mattered most was that, at that moment, she was happy. And, of course, that the cake was delicious. Ever since Nakayama's tense encounter with Ryuzaki behind the gym, Ryuzaki had made a habit of interfering in his life. This constant pressure had only fueled Shimizuki's unease, though there was little Nakayama could do to change it. As a form of compensation for their lack of contact at school, Shimizuki requested one thing: that he give her plenty of attention outside of it. Nakayama readily agreed. Being near her brought him a sense of peace unlike anything else. Normally, he would have doubted anyone who told him he wasn't just a side character, but with Shimotsuki, he could finally believe it. To him, she was truly a blessing. Days passed, and those days turned into weeks. Together, they continued their study sessions until the day of the midterm exams finally arrived. Before they went their separate ways, Nakayama offered Shimotsuki a quiet gesture of encouragement, wishing her good luck. Motivated by his support, she decided to give her best effort during the test. A few days later, Shimotsuki returned with her results in hand. Slowly, she unfolded the exam paper and exhaled in relief. She had passed. She looked up to find Nakayama smiling warmly at her. At that exact moment, a soft breeze entered through the open window, lifting the curtain above her head. The small, gentle motion brought back the memory of the day when their story had truly begun. While Nakayama was comforting Kishi for failing the exam, Shimotsuki approached him with a bright expression and patted him lightly on the back. Holding up her own exam sheet, she blinked in disbelief when she saw the score written at the top, 72 points. Nakayama, who had been convinced she would fail, stared at her in surprise. Shimotsuki, however, grinned proudly and declared that when she truly focused, passing an exam was nothing more than a piece of cake. Amused, Nakayama laughed and congratulated her sincerely. Shimotsuki twirled a lock of hair around her finger and commented playfully that her success was thanks to the encouragement he had given her. Then, remembering that she had to call her mother to share the good news, she hurried off to make the call. She also mentioned that she wanted to celebrate the achievement with him later. As Nakayama thought about taking her to her favorite pastry shop near the station, he suddenly noticed the stairs. When he turned around, almost every classmate in the room was looking directly at him. In that instant, he realized he had made a mistake. Kishi, curious, asked since when he had become so close to Shimotsuki, pointing out that he had never seen her smile like that before. The classroom quickly filled with whispers and murmurs about a possible relationship between the two. The situation escalated when Ryuzaki appeared and firmly placed a hand on Nakayama's shoulder. Without a word, Ryuzaki led him to the music room. On the way there, Nakayama took a deep breath, repeating silently to himself that he was just a background character, an NPC in someone else's story. Once inside, he faced Ryuzaki, who sat down and got straight to the point. He asked what Nakayama had done to Shimotsuki. Caught off guard, Nakayama explained that he had only congratulated her on her score, and that she had simply been happy about doing well on her exam. But Ryuzaki didn't believe him. He knew that Shimotsuki rarely smiled in front of others. In fact, he could remember only one time she had smiled that way, when they were children. He had always believed that her smile was something special, a proof of the unique bond they shared. And yet, now, for some reason, Nakayama had managed to make her smile again. In Ryuzaki's mind, that could only mean one thing: Nakayama was becoming someone important to her. In other words, his growing connection with Shimotsuki was starting to threaten the special place Ryuzaki had always held. Nakayama tried to act oblivious, but Ryuzaki's sharp gaze saw right through him. Though Shimotsuki often treated Ryuzaki with cool indifference, her attitude toward Nakayama was clearly different. Ryuzaki could sense it. She had begun to care for him. That realization filled Ryuzaki with regret. He blamed himself for not paying enough attention to her before. The air in the room grew tense. Nakayama accidentally brushed against a nearby metronome, causing it to start ticking rhythmically, amplifying the pressure between them. Then, in a steady voice, Ryuzaki confessed that he was no longer satisfied with being just Shimotsuki's childhood friend. He had developed real feelings for her. For Nakayama, that was the worst possible turn of events, exactly what he had tried to prevent. From that moment on, Ryuzaki made his intentions clear. He would pursue Shimotsuki as a man, not as a friend. A quiet rivalry had begun. Before leaving, Ryuzaki turned back and asked for Nakayama's full name. He extended his hand, not in friendship, but as a challenge. Nakayama understood instantly. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. It was the start of a battle for Shimotsuki's heart. Later that day, Nakayama stepped off the bus, his expression heavy with regret. Ryuzaki had confided in him earlier, revealing his plan to confess his feelings to Shimotsuki during the upcoming school trip. Nakayama had tried to dissuade him, insisting that it was far too soon. In his view, love required time, a chance to truly know the other person. But Ryuzaki had simply smiled and replied that he already knew her better than anyone. After all, they had grown up together. Ryuzaki had already made up his mind. He now saw Nakayama as his rival. In his eyes, everything from that moment on would be a fair competition, free of tricks or excuses. Nakayama tried to reason with him, but his words carried no weight. Ryuzaki's resolve was unshakable. With a confident glance, he turned to face Nakayama and declared a challenge. During the school trip, they would see who Shimotsuki would choose. The realization hit Nakayama like a blow. His own words had only fanned the flames of Ryuzaki's determination. His quiet nature and hesitance, traits that had always defined him, had now become his greatest weaknesses. His thoughts spiraled into confusion, while Ryuzaki, in contrast, radiated absolute certainty. It felt as though the story itself was propelling Ryuzaki forward, leaving supporting characters like Nakayama struggling to catch up. Weighed down by doubt, Nakayama could only wonder how he was supposed to face what awaited him. As he descended the main staircase, lost in thought, Nakayama unexpectedly came across Shimotsuki. She looked at him with concern and asked what he was doing there. Without explanation, she motioned for him to sit down beside her on a nearby bench. Nakayama obeyed silently. Though she didn't know the details of what was troubling him, Shimotsuki could tell that something heavy was weighing on his heart. She didn't need an explanation. She simply wanted to be there for him. Looking straight at him, Shimotsuki asked him to tell her everything, reminding him that he was important to her. The sincerity in her voice left Nakayama completely captivated. She had an uncanny ability to understand him without words, to sense his emotions even when he tried to hide them. Every phrase she spoke carried such warmth and gentleness that it almost overwhelmed him. After a long pause, Nakayama finally admitted that he had spoken with Ryuzaki after she left. Shimotsuki didn't need any further explanation. Just by reading his expression, she understood the situation immediately. She could tell that Ryuzaki intended to confess his feelings to her. His hesitation, the unease in his tone, it all confirmed what she had long suspected. Shimotsuki was far from naive. She had sensed Ryuzaki's feelings for a long time. She had tried in many ways to make her lack of interest clear, but he had never truly listened, or perhaps he had simply refused to accept it. Now, at last, the time had come to confront him sincerely. Once again, Nakayama found himself blaming his own lack of foresight. He apologized for having underestimated Shimotsuki's determination and confessed that he had tried to act alone to prevent her from becoming entangled in Ryuzaki's emotions. Even so, he offered his support, promising to help her however he could. As a friend, Shimotsuki shook her head gently and told him that she didn't need any grand gesture. The only thing she wanted was for him to stay by her side. That alone, she said with a smile, was more than enough. She wanted to enjoy the school trip together, without worries or drama. Then, her tone turned teasing as she reminded him that he still owed her a punishment for missing the small party she had planned to celebrate her 72-point exam score. With a mischievous grin, she warned that this time she planned to play with him until his face turned red from embarrassment. In that brief, light-hearted moment between them, the weight of the earlier tension began to lift. The story, once dominated by misunderstandings and conflict, now started to shift towards something deeper and more emotional. As the next chapter of their journey approached, it was clear that the time had come for everyone's true feelings and hidden intentions to finally come to light. Beneath the sweltering sun, Nakayama stood quietly under the shade of a tree, waiting patiently. Soon, Shimotsuki appeared, her skin gleaming with sweat from the heat. Nakayama questioned whether her straw hat offered any real protection, though he had to admit, it suited her well. It was a sentiment her mother once echoed, claiming that only pirate captains and her daughter could make such a hat look good. Yet appearances were not everything. Because of her sensitive skin, Shimotsuki had no choice but to wear her long-sleeved gym jacket. Despite the oppressive heat, she wished she could have worn something lighter, a sleeveless red vest perhaps, but Nakayama reminded her that the copyright for such a look was, unfortunately, off-limits. Meanwhile, watching from afar, Ryuzaki observed the scene with a mix of envy and frustration. When Yuzuki and Karari inquired about his mood, he dismissed their concern, insisting it was nothing. As the girls ran ahead to catch up with the others, Azusa remained behind, exchanging a silent glance with Nakayama before following the group. The students began boarding the bus, and Nakayama found his usual four-seater and settled in. A few rows behind, Ryuzaki took his seat. Shimotsuki had hoped to sit beside Nakayama, assuming the seats were unassigned. However, Nakayama informed her that seating arrangements were typically predetermined. Sure enough, the teacher began handing out a seating chart, and as if directed by fate itself, Shimotsuki and Ryuzaki were placed side by side. Though surprised, Shimotsuki had almost expected it. Without hesitation, she approached the teacher and requested a seat change, citing motion sickness. Nakayama, watching from his seat, quietly admired her resourcefulness. As Shimotsuki made her way to the front of the bus, her hair bouncing gently with each step, Nakayama couldn't help but smile. Azusa ended up taking the seat next to him and asked to switch for the window seat. Her playful assertiveness reminded Nakayama of a side of her he had missed. The journey began in relative silence. Eventually, Azusa broke it. She remarked on Ryuzaki's recent change in demeanor. He had become distant, irritable, and clouded by doubt. She suspected that his behavior was linked to Shimotsuki. Nakayama was taken aback. He hadn't realized their interactions had drawn so much attention. Azusa revealed that rumors were circulating, whispers that Shimotsuki often cast secret glances at Nakayama, and apparently, Ryuzaki had noticed. That revelation brought Azusa a painful clarity. Ryuzaki's affections were not directed toward her, but toward Shimotsuki. The realization stung. Questions began to flood her mind. Why had she fallen for someone who barely saw her? Still holding on to a thread of hope, Azusa spoke of an old school legend. If someone confessed their feelings during the school camp, their chances of success would greatly increase. She had prepared for this opportunity, praying at a shrine, purchasing a love charm, even consulting an online fortune teller. Nakayama offered her a supportive gesture, yet despite the encouragement, Azusa seemed to sense that she might be walking toward inevitable heartbreak. Later, as preparations for lunch began, Kishi casually asked Nakayama if he knew how to cook, pointing out that neither he nor Akira had much experience. Akira bristled at the comparison. In the midst of the banter, Nakayama accidentally dropped an onion. Shimotsuki, who had apparently been nearby the entire time, picked it up for him. Her sudden presence surprised Nakayama. When he asked how long she had been standing there, she bashfully hid behind him. Watching this, Kishi and Akira couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. Moments later, Ryuzaki and his group arrived. His eyes locked onto Nakayama and Shimotsuki, and his expression darkened. Without delay, he clapped his hands and began assigning cooking roles. He and Yuzuki would handle the main dishes. Assisted by Kuri, Kishi and Nakayama were put in charge of cooking the rice, though Ryuzaki only allowed Nakayama to light the fire. Turning to Shimotsuki, Ryuzaki instructed her to bring Azusa to help peel vegetables. His tone was gentle, but his concern bordered on overbearing. Whether out of rebellion or irritation, Shimotsuki clung to Nakayama's arm, clearly making sure Ryuzaki saw the gesture. Ryuzaki then called out to Azusa, and she followed without a word. When the two girls met to prepare the ingredients, Shimotsuki appeared with soap and a sponge in hand, seemingly ready to scrub the vegetables clean like dishes. Just as she was about to lather a potato, Azusa stepped in, calmly redirecting the task. She handed Shimotsuki a peeler instead, only to discover that Shimotsuki had never seen one before. Azusa approached Shimotsuki with a curious question. Did she know how to cook? Shimotsuki confidently replied that she did, explaining that she had picked up the basics just by watching her mother every morning. But while that conversation seemed lighthearted, Azusa was actually dealing with a pressing problem, one she couldn't resolve on her own. In a rush, she sought out Nakayama for help. Upon hearing the situation, Nakayama immediately pointed toward Shimotsuki, doubting her capabilities with a blunt remark that she couldn't handle anything. Even so, he agreed to take responsibility for her, though he admitted concern that Ryuzaki might not approve. Azusa, however, dismissed the concern with a reassuring comment. Something so minor, she insisted, wouldn't upset Ryuzaki. And so, Azusa found herself working with Nakayama on the fire-starting team. During this time, Nakayama came to an important realization. Azusa no longer saw Ryuzaki as flawless. That shift in perspective, subtle as it was, felt deeply significant. Amid the new group dynamics, Shimotsuki playfully addressed Azusa as Azusa-san, imitating a certain younger sister anime character known for her pigtails. Amused, Azusa accepted the nickname and ran off to begin preparing the vegetables. Meanwhile, Shimotsuki asked what she should do to help. Nakayama, already tending to the fire, instructed her to simply add more firewood. Unfortunately, she wasn't used to being near open flames and almost burned herself just from the heat. Nakayama stepped in to guide her more carefully, offering tips to avoid injury. However, in the process, he forgot to give her gloves. As a result, Shimotsuki ended up with soot on her fingers. While Nakayama searched for a towel to clean them, Shimotsuki grinned mischievously and pretended she was about to wipe her dirty hands on his shirt. Before she could follow through with the joke, Ryuzaki arrived, visibly angry. Despite Azusa's earlier claim that Ryuzaki wouldn't care, it was clear he was far from pleased. He questioned why Shimotsuki was even present, reminding Nakayama that he had asked him to handle things alone. For the first time, Shimotsuki let out a deep, frustrated sigh, an unusually expressive gesture from her. Before the situation could escalate, Yusuke and Kurari arrived and called Ryuzaki away. The tension faded, and the group eventually came together to enjoy the meal they had prepared. Kishi thanked Yuzuki for the food, though she humbly revealed that most of the effort had come from Ryuzaki. Hashiki enjoyed the curry so much that he asked for seconds. Ryuzaki, still lingering, turned to Shimotsuki and asked for her opinion on the dish. She didn't say much, just that it tasted normal. A flat response that clearly didn't satisfy him. Yuzuki and Kurari chimed in with praise, hoping to lighten the mood, but Ryuzaki's attention remained on Shimotsuki, hoping for something more. After the meal, cleanup began. Each person took responsibility for their assigned area. Shimotsuki went to help Nakayama with the leftover firewood. This drew Ryuzaki's attention once more. Just as the tension began to build again, Azusa unexpectedly stepped in. She defended Shimotsuki, explaining that she had personally asked her to assist with firewood since fire starting was more difficult than peeling vegetables. Not only that, but the wood was heavy, too much for one person to manage alone. She questioned why Ryuzaki had assigned Nakayama to handle the task without help in the first place. Azusa didn't stop there. With calm but pointed words, she brought up a deeper issue. Ryuzaki had been acting strangely lately. With that, she turned and walked away, her back to him. While Nakayama watched silently, he could sense it clearly. Something was shifting. The gears of fate had begun to turn. Cornered by her words, Ryuzaki admitted that he had indeed been behaving oddly. Frustrated, he walked off, leaving behind more questions than answers. Later on, Nakayama and Shimotsuki sat facing each other. Shimotsuki looked down, voice soft, and quietly called his name. Nakayama, puzzled, noticed that her expression looked close to tears. But before he could ask further, she forced a smile and changed the subject with a light excuse. Was it strange, she asked, for someone to laugh until they cried? Though she tried to play it off, something about the moment felt off, enough to cause concern. Just minutes earlier, they had been chatting about the upcoming dodgeball match. Now, it was the boys' turn to play. Shimotsuki had placed her hopes on Nakayama, and though he wasn't confident in his skills, he was determined to do his best for her sake. As the match began, Matsuki cheered from the sidelines, waving a tree branch like an improvised pom-pom. Nakayama looked relaxed at first, ready to take on the game. But in a flash, the ball came hurtling toward him, slamming straight past his stomach. The impact sent him flying backward, his expression blank with shock and pain. He landed flat in the middle of the field. The boys on his team were stunned. Then, as expected, the teasing began. Nakayama had become the first one out. Even Shimotsuki couldn't hold back her laughter. Watching from the side, she burst out laughing, especially at the face he made when he got hit. Mimicking the exaggerated gwa sound he had made, she couldn't stop giggling.